Hi, guys, and welcome to season 2 of the Sit Down with Suzanne podcast. I am your host, Suzanne. I am a minister, a motivational speaker, a life coach, and most recently, a published author. I have over 20 odd years of experience being a mentor, being a leader in multi-million dollar corporations. So in season 1, I was very excited that I got an opportunity to share some of my knowledge with you and expect the same things for season 2. This podcast is about inspiring, motivating, and empowering you, which is the tenets of my brand, Positively Suzanne. So I want to make sure that at the end of this podcast, not only do you realize that you are enough, you realize that you are worthy. So I am encouraging you to listen to this podcast, to share it with a friend, because it is curated just for you. So, as I mentioned, this is the start of season 2, and I am so very excited about it. There's so much that has happened since I ended season 1 in July. I have mentioned right as I was wrapping up season 1 that I had completed my dual masters. I'm very excited about that. I was in the process of writing a book. I did get that completed and published. So yay, I'm excited that I am a published author. And, it was just a lot to undertake. So I'm really glad that I took the opportunity to take some time off in between seasons. But I'm telling you that season 1, I am very, very excited and very proud about, what I accomplished, knowing nothing about the podcasting world and jumping into that and just formed so many deep relationships and just have a wealth of support from other people in the podcasting world. And then season 2, I'm excited. There's a lot of things that I definitely want to talk about. There's a lot of things that I wanted to highlight. There's a lot of guests that I wanted to chat with. So stick with me through season 2, because I promise you that it's going to be a lot of fun. I will be discussing my book, which is called Detoxifying Leadership. Not on this episode, but I will be discussing my book in a future episode, and absolutely would like to encourage, those writers that are out there that are looking to publish their book, to take that step and, get it out there. It is vulnerable. It is revealing, because when you release something of yours out there, then, you are open up yourself to feedback and, review from others. But, as always, I always encourage you to have a very healthy sense of self, just knowing that, it's okay to get constructive feedback to certainly move you to where you'd like to be. But then there's people that's going to provide you with feedback that unfortunately their goal is not to empower, but it is to demean. So hopefully, like the song says, hate is going to hate, right? So hopefully you don't give any credence to what they say. You just focus on being the best version of you, because that is what I am all about. Positively Suzanne, which is my brand, Sit Down with Suzanne, which is the podcast. It's all about, highlighting the positive over the negative. So that is my goal. So I really wanted my first, episode, the premiere episode, to be about something that is personal to me and is relevant right now. And, the month of October, which also happens to be my birthday month, by the way, is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And I really wanted to talk about breast cancer awareness. It seems like more and more we're hearing about more people having breast cancer. We're hearing about more people dying from breast cancer. I remember, I think it was about a month and a half ago, Kelly Preston, who is the wife of John Travolta, who I loved, and Jerry Maguire, and me and my movies. I don't remember what I was doing. I think I had woken up that morning, and I remember looking at my phone and seeing that she had passed away from breast cancer. And the thing is, she had just kept it so private, which kudos to her to be able to be living in that fishbowl and being able to keep her her personal life personal. But I just remember thinking it was so sudden. And, they said that it was like 2 years. And 2 years is not a lot of time. So, to all the families that are, with someone who is going through breast cancer right now, who's been diagnosed with breast cancer, kudos to you. And I really hope that you have the love and support around you. Um, and, as I mentioned, I think we're hearing so much information about people with breast cancer. And, you have to wonder, is it because more people are getting breast cancer, or is it because now that we are exposed to so much information because we have access to social media? Is that why we're getting, so much information about breast cancer, why it seems like everybody has breast cancer? And, it's so I decided to talk about it because a few months ago, I went to my doctor and, um, she gave me the news. Actually, her nurse called me, and she said to me, I had dense breasts, which meant that I was a higher risk for breast cancer. And, that was the information that she gave me. And I will tell you that my heart dropped and I didn't quite know what to do with that information. And then I remember going back to see my doctor about a week later. And then my doctor, she apologized and she said, I'm so sorry that she called you and she gave you that information. I certainly wanted you to be more prepared. And I wanted to talk to you about that. But, in my mind, I'm like, what do you mean? Because I had no information about this. I did not know what dense breasts meant. And I think oftentimes we don't seek out information about something unless it's directly impacting you or someone around you. So I will tell you that at first, when I got this information, I mean, it was this buzzing in my ear. It's something I did not want to hear because all I was hearing was breast cancer, breast cancer, breast cancer. And, I'm thinking to myself, and automatically, I went to worst case scenarios, I'm so young. There's so much I wanted to do, my family, my girls, and things like that. So it was very traumatizing. And, at the time, there was a select few people that I chose to share this information with because it was hard for me to say this without crying. And there's nothing wrong with crying, but it was devastating to me. And I went through this period of, I didn't want to even think about it. So I just kind of blocked it out for a little bit. And, there was something that I experienced and I kind of started to wonder, is there something that I could have done? Could I have done something to prevent this? And then I also kind of felt like a thing of shame. And, it's interesting because I mean, if you listen to my podcast, you know that I'm very confident. So I just never thought that was a feeling that I would associate with that. But I just kind of felt like, what did you do? And I was just like, yeah, there was that feeling of shame for a minute. And luckily it didn't last very long. And then I went into information gathering and I read as much as I could. And I will tell you, the internet is a great resource. You get a lot of information, but you can also go on information overload. So here I am. I have this diagnosis and I am wondering, what do I do? And, it is not a cancer diagnosis. I want to make that very clear. But to me, it was devastating to get that information that, you have dense breasts, that you are at a higher risk, for breast cancer. And I know that there are a lot of people that's going to call me after this podcast, why I did not share that with them. And it is easier to share it in this forum than it is to share this information one-on-one. And I'm going to apologize in advance that, don't take it personal. There is a lot of people that I did not speak to about it. But as I said, I went into information gathering mode and I was getting so much information. It was overwhelming. and it just honestly made me even more like, what's happening? So I decided to reach out to folks who understood. So the first place I reached out to was the Susan G. Komen um, uh, corporation. And, I will say that they were very helpful. The lady on the phone, she was very nice. She shared so much information, a wealth of information. She was calm. She had spoken to people in my situation before. She sent me a lot of information that I was able to go through. And then I also reached out to the American Cancer Society because even though I did not have cancer, being told that you have something that puts you at a higher risk, and that means that you have to get more mammograms. I don't know if you've ever had a mammogram. It's not the most pleasant experience, right? And there's times that, you do feel invincible and you feel that that's not something that is ever going to impact you. But all of a sudden, I'm getting this information that I need to make sure that that is top of mind. So I called them and, they gave me a lot of information. And I also called, like I mentioned, the American Cancer Society. And, when she said to me that, thank you for calling and, how can I help you today? And, I kind of explained to her and I was getting a little teary eyed because every time I was talking about it, I was getting very emotional. And I said, I was very surprised by this feeling of shame that came over me when I got that diagnosis. And, she said, you're not alone. A lot of patients experience that. And I was like, whoa. And, as women, there's so many things that we take on and there's so many things that we feel shame for. And I'm here to tell you, don't feel shame for anything. So I'm sharing that information because I had that. And I just never in a million years thought that is something that I would have shame for something that I had nothing to do with. So I'm just going to encourage you, whatever it is you're feeling shame about, just let it go. Let it go. Let it go. American Cancer Society, they were also very helpful. I told her exactly what my feelings were, and she was able to connect me with someone who is where I am. Someone who have worked with others who have gotten that diagnosis, someone who was counseled and, spoken to them and, was just able to give me the facts. So as it is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, I thought it was very important that I highlight this because, again, I am from a culture that it's not something that, and, it could have changed in recent years, but it wasn't something that we spoke about when I was growing up. It's not something that, you do, mammograms. This is not something that I sat down and I spoke with my parents because that's not who they were. That's not how they were raised. And I do believe that this current generation is much better. But I still think that we do have opportunities, in the Caribbean, to get as much information as we can and to be able to sit down with our little kids and talk to them about breast cancer. Because one of the first things they asked me was breast cancer in my family. And I had to search because I was thinking to myself, like, that just was not something that we had discussed. It's something that I was aware of. So I had to reach out to my mom and just try to figure out which family member, because we were very private. Trust me, if you want to keep a secret, just tell a Jamaican. I'm telling you, like, those Jamaican parents, like, they don't let anything go. So that was not something that was shared. So it was very hard to get information about family history. And it is so important that you share family history about types of cancer and especially about breast cancer. It can save a life. So doing a little more research in regards to breast cancer, it is the second most common cancer among women in the United States. There is other types of cancer that are more common, but it is the second most common cancer in women in the United States. This is something interesting that I did not know at the time, which I found out that Black women and white women get breast cancer at about the same rate. And here's something very important. Black women die from breast cancer at a higher rate than white women. So as a Black woman, being told that I was at a higher risk for cancer and finding out the mortality rate is higher for Black women, I again started to think, well, what can I do? What can I do to, prevent this? And, I'll have, there is nothing that I did to create this. And just for you listening, there is nothing that you did to create this. It's just, it is what it is. Right. So, like I said, I went into information gathering mode, and there was just so much information that you can find out. But I will encourage you to, when you find out this information, don't just take it on by yourself. Reach out. There are resources. There are people that are there that are equipped that can give you more information, that's able to just break it down for you, because there are some things that you read that you truly don't understand, and you immediately go to worst case scenario if you don't understand it. And for me, who loves to read, if you listen to season 1 in one of my podcasts, I talked about the art of reading. But reading about breast cancer, it was very emotional, because the more I was learning, like on one hand, I was very, I'm glad I was getting all that information. But on the other hand, it was terrifying to be getting all that information. And like I said, it just made me so, just, I don't know. It's like, it's something that I'm like, how can I fix this? How can I make this better? And it's also important to note that the female and male actually can develop breast cancer. So it's not just something that is that only women are affected by. So I had mentioned that breast cancer is the second most common form of cancer among women in the United States. So a little more statistic, about 1 in 8 U.S. women, or 12%, develop invasive breast cancer during their lifetime. And this is in the U.S. alone. That is 1 in every, and then 1 in every 1,000 men are at risk for breast cancer. It's incredible when you look at the numbers to see how everyone, and I think a lot of people don't share the story, because as I mentioned, there was that feeling of shame, and there is absolutely no shame associated with it. That is something that we take on ourselves. Another interesting thing that I found out, that women younger than 45, breast cancer is more common in African American women than in white women. Okay, so here I am. I'm finding out all this information. I am under 45. I am a Black woman. There's a higher mortality rate. It is more common, and they're telling me that I have dense breasts, which puts me at a higher risk for breast cancer. And, there's so many other factors that go into a breast cancer diagnosis, and, the risk of breast cancer. There's your age, there's the mutation in your BRCA gene, it's the family history. And, I talked about this before. You have to get your family history, get comfortable talking to your parents, your grandparents, your aunts, or your cousin about breast cancer in your family. There is factors like how soon you got your period, when did you start your menstruation, about your menopause and other breast diseases, things like that, birth control, hormone therapy. I mean, there's so much things that's impacts that. At one point you feel like, okay, you may need to go into a bubble, but cancer is not a death sentence. And then there is a survival rate. One of the best deterrent, it's early detection. And you have to do things to ensure that you find out about it, and that you are equipped, and make sure that, you have all the information that you can. And, like I mentioned, when I found out, I reached out to so many different people. to get this information. Like I said, I did the Susan G. Komen, I did the American Cancer Society, because I wanted to make sure that I was equipping myself with all the information that I needed to move forward. So one of the first things you're going to ask, and, I will encourage women. Okay, so it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month. The best thing, get regular mammograms. Don't ignore it. Don't think that there is no history of breast cancer in my family. I don't need to. Don't think, you know what, I'm healthy. I don't need to. It's important that you do self-exams, every day. Get comfortable with knowing your breast. Get comfortable with, discovering any lumps, anything abnormal. And talk to your doctor about it. It is very important that you talk to your doctor. Reach out to them. I know right now with COVID-19, they are reducing the amount of visits to the hospital, but still continue to do your regular breast exams and continue to get your mammogram. Get educated. Get as much information as you can. And don't just get the information on your own. Get information from experts, from people who this is their life's work. This is what they're doing. Read up, obviously, but get information from people. And like I said, the great resources that I reached out to that were able to give me a lot of information was the Susan G. Komen Foundation and then the American Cancer Society. They were warm, encouraging. I was able to share what I was feeling and it didn't feel shocking to them. And they were able to give me a lot of information. And like I said, honestly, I am 43 years old and I had never heard the term breast density before until they said that to me after a mammogram. So what is breast density? So many different people explained it to me. And there was this one lady that explained it to me. I went to the doctor this week and I will say it was the best way she could have done it. And I wish I could have gotten her on the podcast, but it was just too late to get her on. But she explained it to me in a way that was different from the way everybody else is. So breast density is the measure they use to describe mammogram images. So when you get a mammogram, the images, it is not how your breasts feel, right? So your breast is made up of breast tissue, the milk ducts and the lobules, which are called glandular tissues, and fat. And then connective tissues helps hold everything in place. All right. Breast density then compares the area of the breast and the connective tissue that is seen on the mammogram to the area of fat. So the breast and the connective tissue are denser than fat. And this is what shows up on the mammogram. So when you have high density breasts, it just means that you have more breast and connective tissues compared to fat. Low breast density means there's more fat compared to breast and connective tissues. So when they look at your mammogram and measure your breast density, that's when your doctor can tell you if you have dense breast, and this is when they say, you're at a higher risk or at a lower risk. So and this was something that was, really not fun to hear. Women with high breast density are 4 to 5 times more likely to get breast cancer than women with low breast density. 4 to 5 times. So, the whole time I'm reading all this information and I'm thinking, okay, you're Black, higher mortality rate, more common under 45, and now dense breast is thrown into it. And now that means you're 4 to 5 times. I tell you, my faith held me through that because there were just moments that news alone was overwhelming. And I cannot imagine the women that are living through a breast cancer diagnosis. And I just really and truly want to salute you for your strength, for your perseverance, for your faith, for doing everything you can to not only be well for yourself, but be well for your family. And there's so many women who use this cancer diagnosis to help other women, to share information and to show up and to support. And one of the things I also found out, it was just like high breast density is very common in the US. About 40 to 50% of women over the age of 40, between the ages of 40 and 74, has dense breasts. They say it varies by age and weight. And it says it's more common in both young women and in thin women, right? So again, cancer is no respecter of person. So it's not like, okay, I'm thin, I can't have dense breasts. No, you can have it if you're a thin person. It says about 50 to 60% of women age 40 to 44 have dense breasts. And then compared to only about 20 to 30% of women that's, between the ages of 70 to 74. They told me that, even women that has a healthy weight, they also have dense breasts. And they say there's certain medications that can affect breast density. And, medication like people who take menopausal hormone, things like that. I am not there yet. Thank you, Jesus. I'm not there yet. But you just want to make sure that you talk to your doctor. The thing that I want to encourage you about, it's this, and I've said it before, cancer is not a death sentence. Yes, lots of people die from cancer, and especially breast cancer. But I want you to know that if you have a cancer diagnosis, there are resources out there, and I am not getting paid for this to talk about, the resources, but I really do have to share the information that I received, and all the information that I gave you. I really tried to break it down into my own to make sure I understand it, and that it's simple, for my guests to understand. Because like I said, at first, when I heard the news, like I was hearing this ringing in my ears, so I was tuning out a lot of the information. But a cancer diagnosis is not a death sentence. But I do know that early detection is important. Being aware is important. And, for my listeners who, like me, the first time I heard about dense breasts was when I was listening to this, from, my nurse telling me at first, and then, from my doctor. And then all of a sudden it's kind of like just overtaken my entire thinking. Why isn't this something that's shared? Why isn't that something that we all have access to? And, we do have access to it, but oftentimes we don't, the things that are not directly connected to us, we don't really pay as much attention to it. And, it could have been there all along, and I've just never heard of it. So I'm going to encourage you to get familiar with your body. So I'm going to ask you, my listeners, to get familiar with your body. Please make sure that you are doing regular breast exams every time you take a shower. Get familiar. There should be nothing on your breast that you don't know about. Make sure that you are getting regular mammograms. Make sure that you are getting educated. Make sure that you are talking to your doctors about everything, and ask them about dense breasts, because like I said, I would have never thought to ask, and I would have never known about it until I got this information. And speak to an expert. Don't self-diagnose. I know that the internet sometimes turns us into doctors, but don't self-diagnose, because this is like something like, it's like Alice down, the rabbit hole. Like you just go down a path, and like you just get more terrified each thing you read. So you're like, what's happening here? So please get familiar with your breasts, get regular mammograms, get educated, and speak to an expert. Those are the 4 things I would love for you guys to do. Familiar, regular mammograms, get educated and speak to expert. And the experts, like I said, I'm not getting paid to push them, but this is who helped me. And it was the Susan G. Komen Foundation and then the American Cancer Society. They were very helpful, very kind in providing information that I was able to read. They followed up and asked me if, I needed any additional information, if I wanted to talk to them or things like that. So I certainly have found out more about dense breasts for something that I had never heard about in my 43 years, almost 44 years on this earth. All of a sudden, it became the central focus for me. And in the midst of a pandemic, in the midst of graduating from, graduate school, in the midst of writing my book and publishing my book. And there's just so much that was going on. And this was something that I was dealing with. And every single conversation that I was having, and I was talking to somebody, in my mind, it's like, whoa. And I'm thinking that, and I'm there, and I love that. I love people and I love relationship. But a part of me during every conversation was just so focused on this diagnosis that I was just starting to like, okay, Suzanne, you have to get control of this. You have to just figure this out. So it is not a cancer diagnosis by any stretch of the imagination, but it is something that is telling me that I need to be vigilant. So the things that I asked you guys to do are the things that I'm going to have to do. And I'm going to continue to, find out all I can about dense breasts. And, the funny thing is, it's like, obviously there's nothing that I can do to stop it because it is what it is. There are different types of mammograms that you can do. And, one of the things she was talking to me about this new, fantastic new mammogram thing. And then she was like, unfortunately for you, this is not something for you. And I was thinking to myself, well, why tell me about it if you're going to tell me all about it and then tell me that it's not something that I can use? But, I really want to make sure that you realize that while it took me a while to get comfortable with it, and I am still praying to God and trusting God that He has a path for me. And I'm praying that breast cancer is not that path. I do know that there's a lot of incredible women and men that are currently suffering from breast cancer. So my heart is with you. I'm going to continue to pray for you. There's a wealth of resources of things that you can do to help in the fight against breast cancer. Just going on the internet, there is, I found the National Breast Cancer Foundation. There's things that they do. You can volunteer, you can donate, you can help with their fundraiser. And, there's a lot of things that you can do. And, one of the easiest thing you can do is spread awareness. So with this platform that I have, with this podcast, and I know that I have visitors who are faithful, and I thank you for being faithful. I appreciate every single one of you. So to all my existing listeners and to all my new listeners, I'm going to encourage you to please get familiar with your body, get regular checkups, get educated, and to speak with an expert, because I want to make sure that you detect anything early and that you have all the information that you need and that you are equipped to handle anything. So I was blindsided. I am dealing with it a lot better now. I made it through the podcast without crying. That's a first. I was, but if I had cried, it's okay. I am not ashamed of crying. And that's funny because when I was younger, and that will be another episode, I thought that not crying was a sign of strength. So we're not going to go into that topic today, but that's what I thought. But now I cry freely. And, that happened because I had two best friends who were Brazilian and they cried at the drop of a hat. So thank you, Talita and Marianne. And I also have two girls that, after I became a mother, I did not want my girls to think that they're weak if they didn't cry. So we're going to discuss that at another date. But anyway, I was blindsided by this news, but I am getting better at dealing with it now. So I hope you will not be blindsided by this news, but cry if you want to, right? Cry if you want to. So as always, I thank you for listening. I appreciate you giving me the time to come into your hearing, because I consider it an honor and a privilege. I truly do, because there are thousands of podcasts out there. There's so many different things you can be doing. But the fact that you chose to listen to the Sit Down with Suzanne podcast, I truly appreciate it. So I am going to ask that if you have not already subscribed to the Sit Down with Suzanne podcast, I'm going to ask that you please subscribe. So Amazon recently released podcasts, and I am listed in Amazon. There's so many different things that the Sit Down with Suzanne podcast is on. Sometimes I can't even keep up on all of them of where exactly I am. But I am on Apple Podcasts, I'm Spotify, Google, Overcast, Amazon Music, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, Podcast Addict, Pandora, Pocket Cast, Castro, Castbox, Podchaser, Deezer, Listen Notes, and Player FM. I'm also on the Buzzsprout channels, which you can get my RSS feed, which is Buzzsprout, www.buzzsprout.com. And I'm also on the www.positivelysuzanne.com, which is my website. So any of those forums that you listen to podcasts on, please go ahead and subscribe. Like the episode. You can also reach out to me at Suzanne@positivelysuzanne.com. Let me know if this episode have helped you. Let me know if you need me to just chat with you. Like I mentioned, I am a life coach. I currently have a couple clients that I am working with through medical diagnosis. So I absolutely have no challenges consulting with you just to ensure that, you are living your best life. And that's it. So until next time, thank you for listening. And this is Suzanne signing off and saying, I'm so excited about season 2.